Hello, my name is Musa Chemisto. I'm from Islamic University in Uganda. I'm here to present our paper on behalf of myself and my co-author, that is Professor Rivet from the University of Cape Town in the Information Systems Department. And our paper is titled Conceptualizing Artefact Influence, a grounded theory exploration of an ICT4D study in Uganda. Now, a brief background to the study. So this study is ingrained from the idea that within sub-Saharan Africa, ICT initiatives have been implemented to develop those sectors or to grow those sectors. And based on literature study, sectors like the water, sanitation and hygiene sector, that is WASH, the health sector, agriculture sector, education sector, and many other sectors within sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of ICT has been embedded to improve or grow the sector. And the idea is ICTs are implemented to support service delivery within for communities and to track performance for projects, that is, have performance indicators for each projects that are implemented that are intended to improve the welfare of people. And the paper is also ingrained from ICT4D, or Information Systems for Developing Countries studies that postulate that ICTs are amplifying development conditions within the world and sub-Saharan Africa. And drawing on previous studies about ICT4D or ISDC, that is Information System in Developing Countries, this particular paper aimed to explore influence of the Water Supply Database initiative. And the Water Supply Database is an initiative that was implemented by Uganda's Ministry of Water and Environment to improve governance and track development or progress within the water sector. So that initiative was intended to improve how the sector is managed and track the progress or growth within the sector. And so for ours, from the academic point of view, we intended to develop a theory because we were coming from an ICT4D perspective, develop a theory to understand the perceived influence of the water supply database on the water sector. And the theory is developed by examining what participants describe, that is, participant perceptions. So generally, our research area was to theorize about the water supply database implementation in Uganda's water sector. And because there's limited studies, that is, within the water sector in Uganda and generally even in sub-Saharan Africa, there are limited ICT theories or studies that tackle the water sector and how the water sector has grown or developed because of ICT. So there are generally limited theories about this. You may find a lot of literature, but not literature that theorizes ICT4D or development influence of ICT initiatives. So we wanted to contribute to that, and but generally we only picked a case study, that is the water supply database, which is an ICT implemented in Uganda by the Ministry of Water and Environment. So that was our case ICT initiative or artifact. So we undertook one in the objectives, that is, understand the water supply database, its influence in terms of governance, in terms of development, in terms of how it has changed progress, how it has changed how data is managed, collected, how data is analyzed. And in addition to that, we develop a substantive theory, that is a theory based on what participants describe for us, how influential, how developmental the water supply database has been. So the question that we often had in mind was, how do people, that is the people we mean here, the participants, how do the participants or the different stakeholders perceive development influence of the water supply database? So that was our question. And to undertake the study, we have the approach or the methodology, and we classify the study as an exploratory because exploratory studies are conducted in situations where there's limited literature and not much is clearly understood about the research area. So we felt our study was going to contribute to this. And then we also decided that we wanted to take a qualitative approach, that is, conduct interviews, face-to-face interviews with different participants in the water sector in Uganda. And the methodology we choose, so we became a little bit creative here. So we chose grounded theory methodology, and grounded theory has been used a lot in information system research, and and most of what it has been used to theorize about ICTs. And a lot of some of the studies we saw in literature, mostly in e-learning, in education, in health, but within the water sector there was not almost no studies that we saw that took this approach. So we decided to see how to use the approach and develop theory. And one of the beauties about grounded theory is in the end you have to come up with a theory. So we felt this actually allows us to contribute to the field, that is to ICT4D field. We also took an inductive approach, that is theory is cultivated or developed from data. And the philosophical approach we took was interpretivism. So the interpretive approach comes from the perspective that knowledge is constructed from meanings and understandings that we as researchers infer from what participants say. That is meanings and understanding. We construct, that is social construction of what is real, or what the participants perceive about that particular artifact. So those were the approaches and methodology. So that is the inductive or grounded theory approach took that method. That is, we have data sources, we collect the data, we code the data, line by line coding, we categorize the data with different ways, that is writing memos and doing all these grounded theory concepts like constant comparison, doing theoretical sensitivity, and and then embedding all that data into a core category. That is, all the themes that are cultivated come into a core category, and from the core category we did extra interviews, and then after that we developed a substantive theory. So that was our systematic phases that we took. So from data collection, we had over 30 participant encounters, but over 20 recorded interviews, each comprised about between 30 to 1 hour, 30 minutes to 1 hour, and all that data was transcribed, all that data was coded. During interviews, memos were written. All that data was conceptualized using fundamentals of classic grounded theory, and from that we developed our own theory. So we took fundamental processes that classic grounded theory proposes. So that was data collection analysis. So grounded theory helped us do the analysis and coding and analysis and theoretical contribution using data that we collected from participants. So that diagram depicts our analytical process, and two phases of data collection were conducted, and from the study phenomena, that is looking at the developmental influence of the water supply database artifact, and we had two data phases, and each data phase or each interview had analysis embedded into it, until as researchers we felt that we had saturated, that is, the participants were not telling us anything new, and there we developed a core theme that we felt the participants were telling us that how influential, how impactful that the water supply database was. That is, after so many interviews undertaken, the saturation was hit, and from that we came with the core category and then the substantive theory. So after saturation the research had hit its peak, and therefore nothing new was being learned at the moment from the participants that they interviewed, and there we came up with the substantive theory and theoretical contribution. So that was the diagram clearly diagrammatically depicts our data collection, analysis, and theoretical contribution processes. Now, as a summary, all these data collection analysis processes gave us results, and from the results, our major contribution of the paper is the theory, and we called our theory the theory of optimizing perspectives. And that theory emerged from categorization and analysis of the data, that is, interpretation and coding of the data. And the theory emerged from 4 primary categories, 13 secondary sub-core categories, and then several codes that we generated. So, and in a sense, optimizing perspectives describes how the Ministry of Water and Environment effectively or optimally uses the water supply database, or the artifact itself, or has used the artifact itself over the last years to measure progress, to track performance, to store data for decision making, to do analysis. So in a way, the participants were telling us that, hey, they're using the system optimally. And for us, we feel the system is helping us to grow the water sector, that because they are able to track the progress and also grow it. So figure 3, which is in the next section, actually this lists for us the themes that we came up with. So the major theme there is which is our core category of theory, is optimizing perspectives. And optimizing perspectives is constructed from several hundreds of codes that are summarized into at least. So we, after doing a lot of using grounded theory to do a lot of constant comparison and comparing and combining certain themes that we felt are similar, we had, so the optimizing perspectives constructed by the first 4 primary categories that you see in blue. That is negotiating compromises, sanguine orientating, and validating developments and infrastructuring. And then those 4 are further generated or cultivated from other secondary sub-core categories. That includes conjoining efforts, balancing partnerships, reconciling undertakings. So these are themes that we cultivated from participants' descriptions to try to understand how the water supply database is impactful within the sector. So it's doing a lot of decisioning, mediating interactions, reconcile. The participants are able to reconcile undertakings. They visualize different submissions. They allow different stakeholders to conjoin their efforts, and so these are the themes that we generated. Now, obviously, when you read the paper, you will get more clear descriptions about what each of these are individually. So this is our theory, that is a theory of optimizing perspectives, and those are the themes around it. And this is a table. It's still the table that is similar, describes the diagram that we had in slide 8. And these are secondary sub-core categories on the left. The middle are the primary sub-core categories, and then finally the core category of theory, that is optimizing perspectives. So each of the primary sub-core categories is showing what secondary sub-core categories were constructed it. And what is missing here are the codes, the initial codes that construct the secondary sub-core categories. So this is how we built our theory using grounded theory approach. So in summary, that's our theoretical contribution from the interviews. And in conclusion, so this paper, we had some limitations. That is, one, grounded theory adoption in ICT4D is still growing. It's not yet there. There are very few studies that use it. And our study, which we classified as exploratory, was looking at the water supply database and to see how it has impacted the ground sector. And the reason we did this, because there are limited theoretical and methodological ICT4D studies specifically the water sector. The qualitative approach that we took clearly tells us that the meanings can differ, that is, meanings and interpretations constructed, so different researchers can construct different meanings. And one of the limitations was the study may not be representative of the entire water sector because we picked on different regions of the country. So the idea that we are trying to generalize it is much for later, but for now we looked at the few participants to represent the entire sector. So those are the limitations. That is, one, grounded theory adoption is limited in ICT4D. The study was exploratory. There's limited. We didn't find much studies about ICT4D. The qualitative approach, some studies can use quantitative approaches, and the study may not represent the entire water sector. So in conclusion, this study examined participant perceptions on the influence of the water supply database. We were trying to understand how this ICT artifact has impacted the sector. And we took on the approach and methodologies using classic grounded theory, inductive and interpretive approach to help us build a substantive theory. And we developed a substantive theory from data collected, and we call that theory optimizing perspectives. And however, our future work includes writing more about the implications of using classic grounded theory in ICT4D or ISDC, and then enhancing the theory by doing other studies related to it, or developing formal theory. Now, those who know grounded theory know that the end goal usually is to develop a formal theory, because a formal theory is a collection of several substantive theories from different studies. So depending on the number of studies, you can pick multiple theories and develop a formal theory, because that is more generalizable now to look at the entire sector. So that is future work. Thank you very much for listening to me, and yes, thank you so much for IST for the publications and the sessions. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please go ahead. Thank you.